It is 5:30. We should probably get underway. Good evening, everybody. We're here for a Section 106 meeting for the I-49 Lafayette Connector project. My name is Derek. I work for AECOM, which is one of the teams supporting this project for the DOTD. We're going to go around the room and then the folks that are on the Zoom connection and just do some very brief introductions. Lou, would you start?
I'm Lou Costa. I'm also with AECOM. I'm preparing the environmental impact statement.
Let's go back here.
Same organization.
Hi, I'm Steve Juliet with DOTD with Public Affairs Communications for the next project.
Yes,
Jim McKenzie, President of the State Fire President's Office.
I'm the same duty. I'm a document. British background.
Brent Deming, ADA of Engineering and DOT in Lafayette.
Well, I'm with DOTD.
Harry Cox, DOT Environmental.
Nickel DOT Project Manager.
Roxana Usner, Lafayette Consolidated. Allie Gilbert, Planning Manager, Lafayette Consolidated.
The same office is planning.
And online, they have the ability to type something into the chat, or I could just read their names. Is that right, Eddie?
Yes.
Okay. I see Larry Breland representing Federal Highway Administration and Sarah Gary with APC and the MPO here local. Bree is also monitoring online, and I believe that's the only accounts that we have on Zoom. But if anyone joins, we would like you to just sort of introduce yourself, especially if we don't know you, and tell us why you're here. Oh, all right. And we have Nicole, who is with the SHPO as well, and Crystal Cox, who sounds familiar, but with the DOTD. Is that everyone? All right. Let us begin. Next, please, Eddie. So this is our agenda for tonight. Some of this is a refresher. Almost everybody in the room and online has been part of this conversation to date, or is a professional who knows what it's all about anyways. So this is going to be a little bit of a repeat, but you know, some of us spend a lot of our week on this stuff and some just every few months. So we just want to refresh your memory of some of the maps and some of the configurations of things. Give you a status report, talk through those the changes on Drain Street, which is really the hub of the conversation. I think that we've sort of resolved everything except that edge of Freetown right there, and then dive into the mitigation measures for Freetown, Puerto Rico, including what you see here, wayfinding and gaze, interpretive work, as well as you know, some other aesthetic visual mitigations, and then talk through next steps and action items. But to some extent, this is a real milestone event tonight. This is what we are hoping is the conclusion of the 106 consultations for this period of the project. Obviously, as it moves into design and construction, things change later, and other conversations may be had. But we've been working on this for a few years. We've had a lot of mitigation conversations. We've had some good neighborhood interactions and more to come. So we are sort of hoping we can get to an agreed upon set of mitigations tonight based on the design that we have now. Next, please. What are the goals? Some of y'all professionals could close your eyes and probably tell us what the goals are. obviously, we followed the steps and abided by the goals, which is to assess existing conditions, see what's out there. And that survey was completed of a great, very large study area. I would also say that some folks sent in good comments and said, take a look at this area again. Are you sure you got it right with this house? And other folks even identified some of the advanced acquisition properties that previously were not historic, but could have tripped across the 45, 50-year mark and be considered eligible now. So we revisited all of those structures as well. Went on to determine effects, talk about project effects with all y'all and other consulting parties online and elsewhere. And so then the mitigation for the Freetown, Puerto Rico likely impact is sort of what we want to talk about tonight. We've talked about a bit already. We've heard some of what y'all had to say. We've revised the recommendations and are sort of bringing back that result. And then hopefully after this, we all agree that this is where we're at for right now. We can sign a memorandum of agreement. Oh, sorry. Thanks.
If I may,
It's very tempting to press the buttons.
sir,
Yes, please.
so I just want to be clear that we're only talking about the building part, we're not addressing archaeological at all.
That's right. Thank you.
So doing an MOA doesn't include the 106. It's only one step.
Thank you. That's right. And, like we'd also said, as the project moves forward, invariably, some little thing might change, identification of a staging area. And as we get closer to construction, more of a focus on archaeology as well, of course, which could result in any number of additional conversations later. So, but Carrie, do you want to clarify things?
Right, and the way we dealt with this in the previous MOA, which is now expired, that was done back in 2000. There was a component for archaeology, and as the properties were acquired, then archaeological investigations would be done on those properties. I think we had it, had it done in quarters. 25% of the acquisitions we commissioned archaeology. So I think an acquisition has been happening. It's not complete, but it has been happening. So I think that this MOA will have a similar component. I think where we, where we provide for the investigation, which is promising us to do it, and then follow up with your office. But
I'm a bit confused. I mean, this is a technical discussion. But MOAs are a resolution. We haven't even identified the party. So what you would be proposing if there are active would be MOA within the
well, that's a good question, and I mean, MOAs can have, I'd say it, right, but a PA, it's just an agreement, a slightly different agreement that has unknowns built into it, and so we could certainly do that. The way it was handled previously was an MOA, but we can do it as programmatic and have that built in, because that would be more appropriate for the archaeological unknowns, and as we come to those, we'll describe how we proceed, and maybe some abbreviated.
I would prefer to be able to
Follow up with it. I think I would agree with it. I think that's that they would probably do that.
for the purposes of this discussion of building
Mhm.
legal perspective.
I think it would be messy. I think it would be more messy.
I think it would be very legal.
Well, I think we were proposing that's what was done.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. We're coming out.
Hey, Derek. This is Nicole with the SHPO. I can't hear what everybody is saying. I'm sorry. I'm hearing maybe Carrie talking about possibility of switching to a PA. It's difficult to hear what everyone is saying in the room.
Not that it is, and I was really hoping you were overhearing this conversation because it's ripe for your input.
We are gonna have a recording of this as well, but the recording, there's no mic over there, so.
Right. It's a difficult room, a difficult setup. I will attempt to capture what's been discussed, which is Jim pointing out that, we can't end a 106 process or sign a final penultimate MOA because the investigations, archaeological investigations haven't been done. We don't know what we're going to find. Carrie reported that in the previous ROD, what was done was the ROD addressed the built environment known impacts and then laid out a plan for how archaeology would be conducted, which could result in additional consultations or addendum, being as we haven't broken ground, right? So I think we were all thinking that the project would follow a similar course. Archaeology would be completed later, and if something happens, then you reopen, and do an addendum or something of that sort, at which time I believe Jim was starting to suggest maybe that's more of a PA than an MOA. About captured?
Yeah, probably wind up more with PA.
You can tell Nicole, I'll talk to her tomorrow.
Jim says he'll catch you up tomorrow morning, and there'll be a recording as well.
Yeah, the recording just, I think, may not capture what was said. Thank you so much. Jim, what's Jim's last name?
It's Jim.
Jim, I'm sorry. Yeah, wrote down. Nicole, though, we can hear you quite well, though, so it will work in the other direction. You can talk to the crowd here quite well, even if you can't hear what's going on very well. Sorry.
Yeah, my volume is up. I'm sorry. It's up high because I was trying to hear what everybody was saying. I'll lower it down.
All right, we're going to proceed with the built environment side of things. So a number of the identified properties, we're really threading a needle here with not just cultural resources, but a lot of other resources. We've got wastewater treatment plants and parks and all kinds of things right up on the alignment. A really surgically well done job has been done to sort of tuck it here and move it here, et cetera, et cetera. Sterling Grove was the focus of a lot of the conversation in the late 90s and the 2000s. Obviously, that was a big focus as this project through the 16, 17, 18 years was sort of redesigned. We took some interchanges out, saw some new opportunities. We'll get into that. The La Center, the Central Business District, which has now been listed, right? It's eligible? You listed, that's right, I see. The downtown historic commercial area, eligible. Coburn building, eligible. Freetown district, Freetown, Puerto Rico district, which we'll talk about mostly tonight. And we've gone through some previous meetings, the histories of these, and some of the fascinating elements to them. The Trapeze site, Wallace Estate, and then the new nominated Mills Kennedy Hopkins edition, just sort of to the left of the center. And if, almost all of y'all are all involved in this anyways, but Roxana in the room is the local CLG a professional and can unpack some of those other districts and details if need be. So, we've been meeting and these conversations were part of a lot of the context sensitive urban design conversations. There's an overlap, for example, there's walls in the historic district, there's walls not. And so the aesthetics of wall treatments have been discussed in 106 kind of conversations and outside of them. But this details out some of the specific 106 meetings that were held, where we sort of talk through these potentials for adverse effects and the different ways that we were able to avoid and tuck and miss and not hit Trapeze, not hit Wallace, not come within a block of St. Genevieve any longer, et cetera. But a visual effect on Sterling Grove, so we got further away from that. The Coburn, almost everything sort of resolved. Next, please. We'll walk through those just as a reminder, but I'm not going to take a lot of time since y'all have sort of been through this with us, right? So you've got I guess I could use, I don't want to use the pointer. So in the sort of butterscotch color, that's the Sterling Grove Historic District. When our historians took a look at it, they said maybe there's some other eligible projects. So you can see where it would extend a little bit to the west based on a recommendation, but it has not been acted upon. And the red is the old design of the project, which you can see was nipping little pieces here and there. It was going to be right up on top of the church. This site was going to receive a considerable amount of mitigation. So we were able to push it considerably further away and remove all the in-district impacts. So I think we all agreed that there's we're really close to Freetown. Obviously, the existing Evangeline Thruway is really close to Freetown. It is the border for one side. But it's going to change. It's going to look a good bit different, be more noticeable visually to a few of the structures, which is all it takes. So we were really excited that we're able to pull out of the district, not acquire any of the properties. That being said, we did what we could to get further away, and it's just not really possible. That threading of the needle thing, right, with a number of the other resources. So we are right there on Drain Street. We've got a number of maps coming up that'll really make the visual effect a little bit more clear, a lot more than the words would. All right, so this is just a reminder of where we are in the center. So again, the same red lines is where the project used to be. Yellow lines are where it is now. So you've got some distance between this district and the proposed project. So no adverse effect there. We'll go into the adverse. So here's just a little reminder of where we are, right? With Drain Street and the changes that are going to happen through here. So this is Drain on the sort of lower side. Pinhook right here. So these are the two sides of the couplet. The red line is the old design, which, as you can see, shaves off the edge of the historic district. The yellow is the new alternatives, essentially, which are not in the district at all, except for some work on Drain Street itself, which we'll get into. It did push things over in the other direction, so you can see, you know, obviously it had to come somewhere, and so a little bit further up into Shag Street. And all of those properties and that process and those impacts will be fully discussed in the upcoming EIS meetings, and open houses, etc. So just to make it a little bit more clear about what's going on here. So you're at the, there's two ramps coming down, and then the elevated stays up. So the blue is an indication of elevated. So going through here, the main line is elevated, and then these two ramps are coming down up on opposite sides. And the blue is essentially where it would go from structure to being on fill. Then it's on grade after a while, with three different sections that are sort of important here. We can flip back and forth through the slides. Most of you have seen this, you've studied it, but you'll see that even though we were able to stay out of the district, there's not much room to play with. And the room that we thought we had to play with is all used for maintenance and all kinds of other things. So it's gotten a little bit tight. Here's what it looks like now. Hold that in your mind for a moment, because we're gonna show you a rendering of what it may look like in the future. So let's talk about Drain Street improvements. So there's a number of properties facing Drain Street, and they've got access to Drain Street. So we're going to maintain Drain Street for their access, right? And it's going to be next to a frontage road. Oh, please. This is on this graph. Oh, thank you. Well,
Yeah, right, it's not there.
right,
Well, it's there between 10th and 16th.
but not yet.
Can someone repeat the questions, please?
Just trying to clarify exactly which part of Drain Street is existing, which is the part north of 16th, and then the Drain Street extension, which would be something that the project contributes to put that part of the grid back together. And because some of the access controls on Pinhook really support the idea of that extra circulation on that side.
Great, thank you.
And we'll go back and forth through this because it takes a minute to get this. Here is a rendering of a potential future state. So there's a lot going on here. That's Drain Street, obviously. And then you can see like the 42-inch barrier, which on the other side of that, there's a frontage road or ramp coming down. And on the other side of that is the elevated structure. But we'll show you this a few different ways. So this is just a rendering to show how it may look with sidewalks put in. You know, the DOTD is putting sidewalks in and filling lots of gaps and building lots of sections for pedestrian circulation. And in some other places, filling little parts of the bike network gaps. You can see some lighting and some crosswalks and, you know, some details that are you know, as yet not really defined, but this is the same one with a noise barrier, the new DOTD standard noise barrier on the elevated structure. So if you go back one, I'm sorry, without, right, up on here. Well, this new sort of opaque or transparent or clear noise wall is the standard option. You know, there's color choices you could do with it, et cetera. But that's just an indication of how that would add a little bit of height and a little bit of that repetition of form up there too. All right. And it's the same information, but looked at a different way, right? So you can see A, B, and C section lines up here, right? As you move further south. So way up at A, you've still got the ramp on structure. So you've got elevated structure, then the ramp coming off and it's halfway down, and then you have the frontage road, or I'm sorry, the local road, right? Then come down to B. And not much has changed. Essentially, the ramp was on elevated structure. Now it's on fill, and then you have Drain Street. And then
I'm sorry, can you go back?
Yeah,
a second
yeah.
To the original concept, the initial. And section A.
Yeah.
This is where now?
It's just one side.
Right.
Right.
There's a
So
cross
that's
section.
Green Street is the bottom. That's the road, see where it is?
Yeah. Yeah, so where A is cutting through, what street is that on the southern, right there? There's
On the
gonna be
western
very-
side,
That's Green Street.
no, the other, that road?
Yeah, what's that?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't read my graph.
It's like 15%.
Yeah, 15th, 14th.
14th on this side.
14th, okay.
Okay.
Well, let me pause on this one for a second, but because it helps to explain the pinch here. And I know the dimensions are not easy to see, but you know, our district is right here, right? So you got district, Drain Street, and then you have this ramp on Phil. So there's not a lot of room for a lot of anything else, right? And there is some more space on the other side. And obviously we've had all kinds of conversations about joint uses and understructure uses and all that sort of thing. It's really complex in this area to figure out something of that sort. And then there's lots of maintenance requirements. So you have to be able to get in snooper trucks and inspect things and look off the edges and look from underneath. And so the little bit of spaces that we do have are sort of programmatically very encumbered. Eddie, if you go to the next one, it just simply shows what it's like when it comes down to grade. And that would be further south, right about at C, at the alley. So again, very tight with very little space on the other side of Drain Street, between Drain Street and the district.
And those pillars are what? Or more, representative, no, those pillars on
They're
the
just
left lifting up the highway.
Yeah, it's
Those
to
are
scale.
More representative than what's in the rendering, because that artist rendering, I don't think has those pillars. They're exactly the same as the artist rendering.
You mean this column with this little placard on it thing?
Yeah. Yeah, the artist rendering. Oh, okay, we just don't see
You
it.
just can't see it much.
Gotcha. Okay.
Hey, Derek?
Yes,
Sorry. Are you able
please.
to use your cursor to demonstrate where you are looking at? Because if this is being recorded, you simply go off the screen and we
Ah.
can't see what you're pointing to. So if,
We can control a cursor. I don't have a cursor here.
oh, okay. Just curious. If not, it's okay. Thanks.
Oh, they're not.
This isn't the one doing the, yeah.
It's a weird.
But if you can help highlight the area though, it would help. So essentially it's the structure of the bridge that you can't see because of those walls. So you can't see those ornamental columns, which would be under there. And that was something that came out of the CSS process, and it could have slightly different placards. Freetown could have its own, something like that. Obviously that was the enhanced column that we would use in places that were particularly prominent, visible by passersby, or was in a joint use under structure program space, right? Some of this space is kind of pinched and not very accessible and not even very visible, in which case it may not get a fancy placard because nobody would see it. But we have some other similar aesthetic ideas that we want to share. Next, please. Maybe one more. All right. The control of access is very important. It's going to make sure that this is a preserved investment, right? That it's safe. We drove up from New Orleans today on 90, right, which has like 300-foot long open driveways and roads all over the place. And you go from 70 miles an hour down 5 miles an hour and back up 70 and back down to 5. The control of access policies prevent that from happening by keeping, fewer driveways, fewer connections, getting the spacing right, and that sort of thing. And that has an effect specifically on Pinhook, where near to where Pinhook connects to the thruway, there's not going to be a whole lot of driveways and that sort of thing, which leads into some acquisitions and then sort of re-emphasizes that need for that grid to be completed in Freetown. Next, please. All right, so what are we going to do about it? We're still right on the edge of the district. So as we discussed last time, we've got some ideas. They've been revised based on your input. Let's take a look. In 3 categories, those sort of identifying signages, right? Historic, interpretive and identification signage, and then patterns and images. So, the third one is very straightforward visual mitigation, right? It enhances something visually based on aesthetics decided by the community. Very straightforward. The other 2 are interesting because I think it's partly a matter of helping the district as a whole, right? If we're having an adverse impact on the district, what can we do for the district? Well, it's very hard to plant a row of trees or do a lot of more visual screening because of the space issues, right? So instead, get more creative. So what might the district benefit from? If this is not something that benefits the district, what would the district benefit from? Well, one, like clear sense of boundaries, right? You are now in Freetown. You were not in Freetown 2 blocks ago. Now you are here, right? That sort of defined space is a benefit, right? And so that's the idea behind the gateway signage. And then the interpretation, of course, is just to tell the stories, right? Because, there's some historic sites you drive up to and it's immediately apparent what's going on. Many it's not, right? Especially with neighborhood districts. So using waysides or other ways to just sort of tell those stories that are important to the neighborhood. So in terms of the neighborhood signage, we just did a generic rendering for you last time. And you reminded us that there was a section in the route plan, which is a really well-developed document that the city put some time into to come up with sort of aesthetic standards for a lot of the signage throughout the city. And it has a section on gateways. I'm not saying that the sign would have these colors or that iconography on it. That would be up to historic professionals and the neighborhood's input and that sort of thing. But essentially some sign consistent with the city standards that say, now this is Freetown. This is Freetown, right?
make sure to include bicycle Lafayette signage too. The Bay Loop goes through, along the boat under this area. And there's also the blue route in this area for bicycle Lafayette. And, Stephen, who worked on what you just showed here, also worked on the signage for bicycle Lafayette. And that, as Chris was articulating earlier, that kind of, the bicycle Lafayette signage kind of, takes precedence on top of the blue Lafayette signage, how we understand it. So like, but I mean, we can marry those two somehow. They're intended to complement each other. But in the future, we would like to incorporate as these routes are being implemented. Well, you all have the bicycle Lafayette plan, which has those.
Okay. So for the folks on Zoom, Nick was pointing out to us that there's a newly developed element to the wayfinding standards that is specific to bike routes and the V-loop, as well as the blue route, which I don't know as well, are in this area and would be appropriately signed with that signage, which would also should sync up with the rest of the signage.
Time of construction, and they need to be replaced.
I have a question, guys.
Please.
Nicole, do we have pedestrians coming along this area, or it would likely be vehicles and cyclists, right?
There will be a sidewalk, and it's a somewhat dense neighborhood, so there is some pedestrian activity, but I don't think anyone would go through here. Your origin or your destination would be on those two blocks, I think, as a pedestrian.
And I'm asking because, I mean, I know these are just examples, but for the motorist, you're capturing so much in a short period of time, depending on, if you're at the light or what have you. Just wondering about the amount of information that may be conveyed on the signage and how it might serve the intended purpose is all.
That those signs are specifically designed for pedestrian and bicycle traffic. You're right, Nicole, that a different type of sign would be needed for vehicular traffic that the Route Lafayette does not necessarily identify. But the interstate system does, right? Doesn't aren't there historic standards
On the interstate.
on the interstate? I mean, I've seen brown signs and things listed,
What do you mean for historical?
as you drive through a district. I don't know what those things are.
I think maybe what Nicole is suggesting is that you can't have 30 words on a sign for a motorist to say, and that what the motorist gets just has to say either Freetown or welcome to Freetown, Port Reed, right? Something more succinct.
Yeah, my question is that a standard sign that the DOTD uses already, or is that something that we have to add to our Route Lafayette for a motorist level historic district identifier? That's really a question.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's criteria.
Okay, but that can't be included.
Well,
But Nicole brings up a good point. Is it possible that we work to on the strategic placement of these signs where there could be more pedestrians in the historic district?
Yes.
Well,
So
our
please.
expectation was not that this would only be on Drain Street. It would be throughout.
We have a map.
Where there are places where pedestrians.
Right, so that would address Nicole's comment, which is a good one.
And what we're trying to do tonight is just agree to the general concept and scale of the operation, But obviously, there's a point later in time where each individual sign is laid out, and the ones that are only seen by motorists would have a different scale and wouldn't have any details, and could still be consistent with all the aesthetic standards, right?
Is that shared use path along path still being preserved? It's been a while since you and I corresponded about that.
It is.
10-foot wide shared use path along the southern portion of path, which will hopefully cross the interstate and get to the other side. Well, 4 feet.
I think that's the
It does. And I know we're building sidewalks on Taft, that multi-use path. I know it's kind of an odd one, you know, it gets a lot of cars in it, but I know there is a bike lane on part of that and the full sidewalk connections.
Oh, yeah, we know that people park on.
we could just enforce the park.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you guys are doing a pathway along underneath the interstate still, or is that a separate conversation? Is it? Okay. I mean, it's in that area. So. But I mean, something to consider as well.
Mhm.
You know, if you're looking at that pathway underneath the interstate going from 14 all the way to Willow, I would recommend incorporating that path into your mitigation process.
If there's a, you know, to whatever extent that network is fleshed out, including that one underneath the thing that we've talked about forever, obviously that would be talked through in terms of making sure the little connections, you know, there's a preliminary design phase where we'll get, you know, much sharper pencils out and get to that level of detail. All right, so this is just another look at some of the broad signage. As pointed out, the document doesn't give you a specific just motorist welcome thing, but you know the aesthetic standards could still be followed for such. And then I'm excited about the historic identification interpretation stuff because there's some really interesting stories to tell, and they don't just jump off the building facades at you. So this is how those types of signs are laid out in the plan in terms of the aesthetics, but the content would be developed at a future date by historians with neighborhood input, and it can be in a lot of different ways. DOTD as professionals and can do that. City as professionals and can do that. Working together, you know, there's a number of ways this can be done. Obviously, to pick the stories, right? Here's just a list of some of the stories, and you know, obviously, there's a great variety of little known and obviously like Governor Mouton and Khan and all that, right? So there's some very well-known stories and not so well-known stories. I'm excited about the record shop, the multilingual baseball games, and some of these things that maybe folks walking around have not heard of. A lot of what might dictate what becomes the best theme is the thing for which you can find the photographs, right? Because you want it to be all relatable. And like in 1930, when Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey was in the baseball field with the circus, that photo, you know, will be relatable. What we want to do is connect to people who don't already love history. There's a couple of stores in the area that, you know, Darby's isn't that old, but a Butler's drugstore right over on Gordon Street, which isn't there anymore and such. You know, I've done some waysides for retail places, and everyone loves that because you get like this is what razors cost back in the day and the price of bread, and people can just like easily relate to that versus like this general led this battle and like, I don't know, I've never been in a battle, right? But I bought bread, right? Anyways, Good Hope Hall. Some of these sites are remote from our impact edge, right? Up on Stevenson, on Gordon, Good Hope Hall location, they're a bit further away. That being said, there's plenty of other stories to tell, plenty of places to put it, and it's not that this immediately offsets the visual, it's that the benefit to the district as a whole is an offsetting to the detriment, the visual detriment. Oh, geez, Eddie. Here's a map. It's just a map. It's just a suggestion. Obviously, this can all be revisited later, and one of the interesting parts of all this is how the right-of-way and the financial mechanisms work, right? Because we really are not going to acquire anything in the district, even if everyone in the neighborhood wants the sign right there, in which case, like, we'll give you the money for the sign and you put it there. Some, you know, there's right? Because we don't want to do any further damage. Obviously, we don't want to talk about this forever either. It doesn't need to be something at a big I-49 open house. It's really a neighborhood-based conversation with some historians to influence it. But I think Lou put a lot of these dots on the map for us here. We've got La Louisiane Records. That's a fun story to tell. Mouton House, is a Good Hope Hall location, et cetera. Like I said, rather remote. And then the red places are major ingress egress for the neighborhood, where you might put a Freetown Historic District sign or welcome to Freetown sign, whatever that might be. Obviously, the traffic configuration is going to change, the volumes are going to change a little bit with the project. And there's a point at which, like I said, with sharper pencils, you look for those opportunities, those publicly held little triangles of right of way you can put things in, and where views will be best, right? Because you want the view behind the wayside to have some connection to things, right? Next. Lastly, we know we're really close to the district, and it's going to be a visual change. It's arguable, the Federal Highway Administration doesn't like to say good and bad views, right? There's intactness and vividness and integrity and all, and then viewer sensitivity and all these other ways to categorize things without saying good and bad, right? So it's interesting when you get into something like that, everyone has visceral reactions to things, what you want it to look like, this color, this theme, that theme. But essentially, whether you like it or not, the visual context will change with this project, right? Some argue it's for the better, right? It's gonna be a very clean design, noise walls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, landscaping, new sidewalks, et cetera. Obviously, one way or the other, it's a big change. So we looked at some ways that we could treat the walls with form liners and paints and such. This was also something discussed during the CSS urban design conversations. We showed a lot of different options for these, and the general agreement was that we should use only natural patterns, nothing too geometric or abstracted, modern, but stick with more natural patterns, but not rock, like things that aren't here so much. Leaf patterns were very popular. So here's just a number of examples, the one with the trees down the bottom. And obviously these can be custom designed. They could be different in different places on the project. But what was agreed during that series of meetings for 2 or 3 years was that natural patterns would be best.
Well, you all did support too. There would be a good partner in creating some kind of unique design that is conducive for our local culture. And we had a partnership with them years and years and years ago with Tom Salmon.
That's right.
He's retired now.
Oh.
Michael Ye had a good partnership with them on this design, like proposal designs at current interstate.
Yes.
I don't remember the outcome of that, but I know that UL would be a great resource for finding good designs.
Absolutely. I worked with UL on other projects, and they were actually part of the team, I believe, for a time, Dr. Salmons and his crew, and they did a lot of good things, a lot of out-of-the-box thinking while we were still redesigning the highway, and some interesting ideas, and added, I don't know, 5, 6 different milestones, different classes had brought their products, and I-49 folks brought people and listened and digested some things.
I mean, if you're looking for inventory.
Yeah, right.
It would be great for it.
Mm-hmm. And it's a big local arts community. This could be something that gets turned over to the arts community and say, y'all work this out, right? Here's just a variety of images. We've got a lot of slides of different images. These are all on walls. Obviously, we also have kind of a small mural industry in Louisiana, right? Mike B and some others are nearly nationally famous for their mural work, and it's almost always telling a really a deep community story. It's not just a pretty picture. Very creative things are being done to relate to a lot of different populations. So those are options. We're not trying to pick one tonight, right? But we would get some sense of the patterns versus the murals and where you're at with that. Some people love murals and some people hate murals.
I mean, it's more permanent. That's my vote. It's just more permanent to me. And every time I see it in other states, it's just something, there's like solidarity to it. That's more permanent, it'll be there forever. For murals, it just seems to me it would be a lot of maintenance, not to maintain. They're pretty. I mean, maybe perhaps like,
So this is not the meeting where we're gonna decide that, right?
About which,
Yeah,
now, we would decide tonight that, yes, you'd like a pattern on the walls or a mural, but we don't have to decide whether it's a pattern or a mural tonight. And Nicole and Sarah and others, Nick was just saying, he was suggesting patterns, because they're more long-lived, not as, long-lasting, not as easily vandalized.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in about the murals. And I know we're not deciding, which tonight, but we know that, as I think a gentleman just stated, the mural will come with maintenance, right? And so who will be responsible for maintaining the mural, any vandalism, or just over time, the fading of it? All of those things that come with this possible choice. I think that needs to be a part of the discussion along the way, not tonight, but along the way.
It's interesting you brought that up because there's been a lot of conversations about maintenance, as there's some of these features, and you probably saw a footnote on an earlier slide that, there are some enhancements of things, like extra pedestrian lighting, green infrastructure, and some of the roadways, a few little odds and ends that would be for the city to maintain. Obviously, the main line, the DOTD will maintain. And then there's some that can still be discussed. So this could be something that the state would maintain, or in the cooperative endeavor agreement with the city, they could also say, in addition to maintaining sidewalks, maintain the murals. And if, often with some financial component to it, sometimes not. That is the ongoing challenge with artistic, purpose-built murals. Some cities have gone to much more of a laissez-faire, maybe just sort of nearly a graffiti-like a burgeoning of artists and a free and open space, which then comes with its own evolution of imagery and such. But
and the resulting neighborhood fights that happen after somebody paints over someone's imagery.
Well, you probably have seen this before. Murals get people excited.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes if you're trying to lead a public conversation, you don't want to get them extra excited. And the pattern is just like, well, would you rather have an oak leaf or another leaf? Be like, oak leaf, that's fine, we're done. But you start showing these things, and becomes part of this almost.
I think generally we've made a move to quite a few murals in the city in the last few years. I think the mural would be desirable.
For some reason, we've been lucky with vandalism, with the lack of vandalism.
Excellent.
we have a lot of good artist programs around. So
Carrie, is there anything you want to say in terms of the specificity with which we were trying to get tonight in terms of this wall versus mural question? I'm not, it's a good question, how far we want to go with that.
Right, and I think probably the best way to call it aesthetic treatment or something like that, and then have the decision point later to be made between district, city, neighborhood. I think some kind of combination of that. Committee, to decide. To have input on what.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we'll have nice little. And some of the aesthetic treatments, we call them
Form liners.
the iconic imagery like that, or
generally LCG is concerned about the lack of participation of the folks that live in Poplarville. And we'll be doing, working really hard with Freetown Puerto Rico Coterie to engage the folks in this neighborhood more than they have been.
We'd like that. We've endeavored to do so. When we come back in January, maybe, to do a bigger open house and, you know, with all the designs and the traffic and everything, we do intend a number of, still small, pop-up and planned engagements with specific neighborhoods. So we want to get, you know, into Freetown, back into the church on Willow, back into the community house in Macomb Bizet, and talk to folks in those locations in smaller groups. And some of the folks go into them that live right next to this, right? Instead of hoping they come to us.
So please, like, use us to help you get those folks. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks. Carrie, I'm gonna put it back to you if I can. So do we need some sense of scale to wrap up tonight, right? Like the wall, there's going to be a treatment along the wall of the ramp until it gets to grade, right? We just later would decide on it. But in terms of the signage, for instance, do we want to agree on a general approach to that helps us understand the scale and come to agreement, right? As in, you want a gateway on each side, each of the 4 sides. You want interpretive, at least 3 sites interpreted, or just because I don't want to have to come back and have another meeting just for like a 5-minute conversation. So how close are we now to writing an MOA, PA?
Yeah, maybe have, so in the MOA, I think that, because it'll be probably a dollar figure that has to be per hour, right?
Mhm.
What would say is something like up to so many, up to so, you know, so much money for the site. We don't know what the cost is.
But it would be easier to make the detailed refinement decisions when we go, okay, so the signage in say this place at $4,000 cost this. And we're looking at stamp patterns here, and that costs this extra. And then we could say neighborhood. Here's what we're looking at. And we could play the, you know, we don't want this, we want that. And then, you know. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm wondering. But if you have a dollar amount, the details don't matter, right?
We'll need to get what you want,
I took a call.
Yeah, right, because
Because
the thing that you don't want to wind up with is the cost will provide funding up to $10,000. And then at $10,000 only go with like one thing, you know, one side.
So that's why you
want to spread it out a little bit more and have more benefits to more of the neighborhood. So I think that what you know, if y'all could work on it.
I was just gonna say, since you've done
Why don't we
some
do-
in the neighborhood already, that maybe we put it together a proposal. We're about to spend $300,000 on this big money sign, all up and down the corridor neighborhoods. So we have a sense of how much all most of these are. Yeah, so how much is it?
And then, you know, for y'all, they're kind of a good example, a good suggestion, like a county around this subject matter. I think that an idea idea of like, how many reasonably put scattered around for the most important place. Okay, just blanket in the entire neighborhood signage. That is, so.
And actually ask y'all help with this.
So we could separate two, three.
Yeah.
Right.
We're gonna introduce
So the same thing could happen with trees. If we wanted a buffer on our property, we wanted to end it in a way to have to do that. So we haven't even gone, I'd like to get to that discussion.
Let me try to catch up the folks online with where we are for the moment, because we're shifting to a new thing. So the old thing, Nicole and others, so we were asking about how specific we're trying to get tonight in terms of gateways and such, and get a read for what we presented and such. Carrie and Noel were clarifying that it's usually a financial agreement, so X number of dollars will be afforded to this mitigation. And if you want 11 moderate signs or 6 really awesome signs or whatever mix of that that it is, it would be something costed out. To which the LCG staff said that they'd like to put some thought to that and propose something back to us. And then there was a little bit more conversation about servitudes and some things like that. Noel?
So we're good.
we don't, we're not.
Right. Noel clarified, we're not acquiring property for this, right? Yeah,
In that.
for the, yeah, or servitudes or easements and what have you. And
Somebody who's watched this for a long time, if you give a cost number now, say, 20 years from now.
Hmm.
So, my skills,
Well, we can talk about that. We have to have a prize, yeah.
You're not wrong about.
Chip was just adding that it may be a better approach to quantify the number of signs, since costs are going to increase over time. So if you nail the costs, you have to do it in future dollars, or the number of signs diminish over time.
No, we're still.
All right. Thank you, dear.
All right. So how are we feeling on these 3 proposed mitigation measures?
I have a question, Derek. Sorry, I just want to let you know I have a question.
Please.
Okay. Regarding the signage, the historic ID signage, are you all possibly thinking more like a marker? And is there already a marker design in Lafayette, downtown Lafayette, that may be used in the neighborhood, or have you all maybe thought about bringing something that would be specific to Freetown? Because we're only talking about Freetown for this mitigation, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So
Um,
that was one of the things I was trying to distinguish. I think it's important to distinguish between the wayfinding, which is going to give direction. It's going to tell folks, where to find this and that, as opposed to the historic signage that's going to give that history. or am I incorrect in saying that the wayfinding is only more of a directional? Because I think I saw a little bit of both in one of the slides for the wayfinding. So I think it's important to, that we understand what is being proposed for the different types of signage. If it's going to be within the neighborhood, is it more of a marker that, folks have envisioned for that purpose?
So Roxanne is good. Talk
We
about-
can answer that. Our standard does include historic, I guess you could call it interpretive signage for districts. It's part of the wayfinding signage, so there is actually a third type of sign. And Derek did have an image of examples of that standard, but they were very tiny and, but they're there.
It would be, y'all would be the final decision maker on the design of those consistent with your own standards. We just, when we came last, we had some generic looking welcome to the neighborhood signs and you said, make them look like that. So, but distinctive types, right, out of the route plan.
But I know Nicole may not have seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, did she see what those?
Should be able to.
Why don't we go
if-
back to that?
Go back to signage if you would.
Back up a little bit. There'll be-
And so just to clarify, there are some different sign types. So we primarily had recommended two. Identification. This is Freetown. Welcome to Freetown, Puerto Rico, whatever it might be. Just helps to make it a cohesive district. Gateway. Thank you. Yes. And then there's the interpretive. This was the old music mart where Louisiana Records started. And these people recorded here, and it used to be right here. And it's got a lot more words on it. I don't know about the wayfinding per se.
And then that's the third type, the wayfinding. It's just, yeah.
Yes. It is an example of the new Route Lafayette-based wayfinding sign. I'm not necessarily saying there's a need for wayfinding signs in Freetown, though. We're showing this because we wanted to show examples of how your signs come out, right? But, and maybe there is, y'all are gonna tell us what you think is best. Maybe there's.
There's possible Lafayette wayfinding signage, but there's the point of interest neighborhood sign. Do you guys want the wayfinding signage?
We're gonna make a proposal. Yeah.
Can you give us some sense of how long it will take to give us that proposal?
Oh,
So,
that question again. Kathy, do you think we can- I think we can do something. We can provide something similar to the slide that you showed
Mhm.
in a couple of weeks with the
Great.
type of sign and a cost of the sign fabrication installed.
And obviously, we have some cost data too, as we've done that, some different things, so we can compare the two, but that'd be fast. That'd be great. Santa's bringing some resolution this year.
It'll be a cost and location.
Yes, yes,
And type,
yes.
right?
Yeah, location
Good.
by type.
Super.
Type, the location, and
Great.
Well, for bicycle line, yeah, just to be clear,
we're gonna include.
what you do, because we don't have any bike routes implemented yet, with exception of TAP. TAP does have the multi-use path going through the interstate, which we do want to do wayfinding signage in the future. I just want to be clear, like, bicycle line, yeah, I'm gonna discuss it with Kathy, but it's either it'd be nice if you guys could replace what's existing at time of construction, or perhaps we could include it. New. I'll talk about it. No, I'm talking about bicycle line, yeah.
The district though.
No,
You're talking about-
I'm talking in the context of the district, but eventually that might happen.
So what he's saying is between now and the time that the project is constructed, he will have those paths and there will be historic signage, wayfinding signage, and all kinds of stuff with respect to that district. And his concern is this part of that? Do I have to know
Of
what
the
that
proposal.
is? Or will you just replace what you take out when you construct the interstate? I think it's the same. There's signage there, you're constructing the interstate, the signage comes
all
out
I'm
because of your construction, you're gonna put it
Yeah.
back, right?
Yeah, that's all I'm asking for bicycle lot, yeah. But I'm gonna discuss that with Kathy, and we'll let you guys know in the final proposal. Right? Or
Can
ask
we
it.
move on from signs?
I'm sorry.
Can we move on from signs?
Yes. Next action step, final slideish thing, right? So,
Derek,
yeah,
can I
please. Yes,
just
I have no more slides.
say, what would be ideal for us? And we are at the disadvantage right now of being in between administrations. We had a recommended path of action, which I understand DOTD cannot fill with regard to trying to your buffer here. But we would like to work with y'all for the construction of drain, to make drain like a public plaza street that potentially has trees that could act as visual buffers. And we'd like to work with you on that, knowing that we want to pursue our proposal to you, which was to buy out those properties on foot. But I am in the disadvantage of being between administrations and not knowing if that commitment will still be there. Regardless of that commitment, we want to work to make Drain a street that is maybe narrow for one car to pass at a time, freeing up room for a good streetscape design that is aesthetically pleasing and creates some attempt at a buffer from a ramp coming right down.
I don't know if y'all on Zoom were able to hear that or some of that. Nicole, could you hear what Kathy was suggesting?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
So obviously there's a good 20 or 30 roads that we're gonna have a lot of conversations with over the upcoming years, and the little details about drainage and aesthetics and all that sort of thing. I don't know, but stronger experts in the room than myself, but I think that Drain Street conversation, which could have a mitigation element to it, might not be something we really capture in the MOA. It's really just a matter of, just like with Simcoe or any other street, you know, working with the DOTD to get out of it what you want out of it. I don't know. I don't know. Is there a place in the MOA or PA potentially where this sort of thing? I don't see it sitting there, but maybe it does. Maybe it's just something that gets worked out in the next stage of design.
So we want to know if we need to, put that down. Or is that something that could work out? I mean, you're saying that there's a way to make Drain Street narrower. So that there is a
Well,
buffer, or just saying-
it-
Can it be made narrower? I don't think it.
But if the local, if LCG purchased or acquired that land and made fewer, because a lot of it's adjudicated, and made a little parking thing for this little green space, dog walking, whatever we ended up on our property right there at Drain Street, then perhaps the right of way could be smaller, one way, and we would have room for street trees right there. So that you could allow us to make things. You know, I mean, and that's what Derek said.
Yeah.
So we don't have to address that.
Right. As few sort of conditionals as possible. But yeah.
But if that kind of change was going to be made, then it has to be Mark it out now in the MOA.
Well,
I think we have to think about the street. I'm not the engineer, but my understanding is the street is already as narrow as it possibly is. That it's, you know, it's at a minimum one-way
Oh,
street.
it already is.
And, well, it's more than 12 feet wide, but it's not, it's not a two-way.
It's not.
But this isn't necessarily precluding if we get a design, things change. Water, right? If there's some kind of.
I mean, we put Drain Street there to service the property, to give access to the property. If the city owns 100% of the property, then they can say they don't want access.
And that's our problem with the administration, because we're in the middle of a new administration, a transition. We don't know what
right,
what the answer is to that.
not today.
So we wanna, a couple of weeks to the MOA and hope we don't have to make the decision about Drain Street until later in the.
You buy that out, with the access. Say, it's not.
Maybe like in the process.
It changes.
Yeah.
We can do that anytime,
That's-
any project.
Yep.
That's, okay.
But right now, y'all don't know what happens to provide access to all these properties. And if it's not out,
Okay, correct.
we're gonna have
No,
to sell this
understood.
until you get. And that's it.
Well, home access be maintained on Drain Street during construction. That would be my recommendation.
I'm sorry, Chip, you were trying to, yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, if you exclude any design things with the Drain Street as part of the mitigation, part of the MOA, MOA specifically, that's not considered. The MOA is not part of the MOA. It goes to the MOA, but you have to agree that. Yeah, I think is where we are, which I think is where you are, yeah.
It's like. You know, all throughout project development. All the people. But just because you don't be able to. All that. So, I mean.
right, yep.
You don't want to contradict it, then bring it to our tab. Yeah.
But it's just a matter of the regulatory sequencing though. I think that if the neighborhood wants that and y'all want that, it reduces the cost of the project for the DOTD and, you know, unless there's some other thing I'm not thinking of, everybody's happy. But we can't write that down yet because it's predicated on things that would be adverse to the district, so.
What's our time like? We have until 8:00. Is that right? Okay.
We're nearly finished, but yes, we have more time. What you got, Nick?
Well, the river, are we talking about that here? Between Hyman Park and Bay Development, the Hyman Park Master Plan calls for a pedestrian path, sort of a boardwalk. mean, just so you guys, if we have that in place in the future, if you could replace it, or perhaps provide enough room in the bridge span across the river to accommodate the pedestrian path. I don't know how wide it is.
Well, we'll have to cross the river.
That's on the so that's on the east bank of the river. That's called the Hitchcock Trail, which Eddie worked with him on that. And so that's going to be preserved. There's another path on the opposite side of the river. Correct, correct. But there is one proposed cross, but I'm talking about along the river.
Okay, again, it's not there.
I understand that part, but I'm talking about, keep in mind for construction to provide enough room under the bridge. Oh, the clearance. Yeah, that's my comment. We'll provide enough. That's it. I was just protecting. That was part of that.
You work that out when you get permission to build it.
Well, but what he's saying too is that as we choose span lengths
They'll
and,
be building it on the right of way. So they're gonna have to make a deal with the
right,
to build it in the first place.
right.
And so any details of that, how you
And
rebuild
there's
it
already
after
one
the road.
existing anyway.
On the south side, but you're talking the north side, right? Okay.
There is a master plan, and I think it was adopted, right? At a Hyman Park.
Yeah.
Master plan.
So that's not the big Beaver Park, Hyman Park, all that park, is just for that one. So that's a recent thing?
No, it's the whole thing.
Okay, gotcha. All right, we're tracking then. I think we're all familiar with what that is.
Yeah.
Yes, very good. Well, let me see if the folks online, the conversation was taking a turn, still project related, but not 106 related. But anybody on Zoom have any last comments, assertions, or questions, or anything of that sort? All right. Is there anything in the chat by any chance? Okay, in that case, we'll call this 106 meeting adjourned, but now you're all in the same room anyway, so, Thank you, everybody.